Hi, Paul. Welcome to Better Tech. We're excited to talk to you today, but before we get into today's topic, can you kindly introduce yourself for our audience?
No, thank you. Yeah, my name is Paul Twigg. I'm the CTO in Canada for NTT Data Services.
So, Paul, what's the day-to-day like for a modern CTO?
I would say 12 hours of meetings there, funnily enough. But the life of a CTO right now, I think, has changed as we've gone through COVID and through the pandemic, where being in front of customers, I think, was my daily routine, and now it's been in front of Zoom or Microsoft Teams calls, and being in front of customers, being in front of staff that way, a lot less show and tell. And I think a lot more conversation that's out there. So meetings, I guess, is what I'd say the changes right now.
So, has, like working from home, has that also been like 12 hours every single day?
NTT Data Services, absolutely fantastic company to work for there, and so I'm not going to turn around and say, hey, it's 12 hours a day. I think the reality of it is there's so much work out there right now. There's so much unproven technology, there's so much technology change, there's so much technology deployment inside organizations that there literally is enough work for everybody to work as much as they possibly can. Some days it seems that it's 12 hours a day, right? My commute of maybe a half-hour drive in the morning has gone to 30 seconds of walking from upstairs to downstairs and back upstairs again. Certainly there's so much work to go around for everybody trying to solve the problems that are really there now of enabling remote work, enabling collaboration, enabling good purchasing of software or of services, because everybody's budgets have been cut, right? So we're looking for new and different ways to be able to do everything that we've done for the last 5 to 10 years.
So you've been at Entity Data Services for some time now. Was there ever a situation that was particularly challenging for you and a situation where the outcome was surprising?
I would say, every large project that we work on with a client is challenging to a certain extent, and that's not because of the client or lack of preparedness on our side. That's literally because the technology solution that we're really trying to solve. We're trying to implement a 3-year roadmap in a month there, and we've just gone through that with the productivity suite of everybody working from home. I think we're just embarking on an automation journey right now, and even an even bigger data journey than maybe what most organizations have been through there. And so, when we look at challenges that have come up, those are the specific challenges. Is really venturing into a ground that not many or very few people have been into before at the speed that we need to be able to operate there. And the outcomes have been amazing. There, if I review some of the projects that we've done at NTT Data Services during COVID, some of the things that we've helped our clients out with that are not even IT related. Sometimes it's been our healthcare team working with our healthcare clients in just delivering things that are needed, delivering PPE stuff. But even from a technology perspective, being able to spin up thousands of virtual environments over a weekend for a client to be able to grow a service desk. Lots of really good stories, and at the end of the day, those are the successes or the things where you could say the outcome was surprising for us in those situations.
And you mentioned the 3-year roadmap. Is that something that you believe all CTOs should be doing, or is that some, like your own touch to it?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think anybody that looks at a 3-year roadmap now is looking at it and saying, how long am I actually going to be given to go and implement that roadmap, right? Where we've got the all sides of the wall falling in on that roadmap now, where we've got very limited budget. right? Budget for only, real things, say real in inverted commas. We've got to make a roadmap that is very transitory, right? What's the next thing that's going to hit the business world, right? Beyond budget. How is business going to look go forward? We've seen, just take the restaurant business. Every restaurant that was able to spin their business around and offer curbside delivery or pickup has been able to, almost survived during the pandemic. Any restaurant business that wasn't able to be able to do that hasn't then. So, we look at across all of our clients across the globe as they're trying to deal with their different business outcomes and really try and understand what they need to be able to go through and implement. So, if I'm in the property management industry right now, where an industry that's really struggling, or in the hotel industry, another industry that's really struggling, am I really going to implement a 3-year roadmap there? Because to be honest, I don't know what's going to be 3 months, never mind 3 years. So, what we're really recommending clients there is, don't necessarily look at a 3-year roadmap with technology, but build a methodology for your roadmap that will enable you to quickly change as change is required. Right. So we've got to have an understanding of where we want to go. Each of that understanding has got to have business outcomes that drive to revenue, drive to cost savings. But at the end of the day, it's got to be flexible. We can't embark on these 1 year, 2 year long projects anymore without the ability to off ramp during that project if circumstances change.
So, Paul, talk us through having an effective strategy for each technology practice area.
It's an interesting question. It's that very, very wide question. Maybe better for a discussion at another point in reality, right? Because we'd have to look at that particular a particular technology practice area there. However, an effective strategy. Has to focus on, I would say number one, it has to have change built into it, or the ability to change. So when we're discussing how far we've got along that strategy, where are we going with that strategy, we've got to understand change. It's got to have business outcomes in there. I think if you flash back a few years and you looked at a typical chief technology officer, and we were looking at proof of concept, that was the acronym in every other sentence that we had. We're doing a proof of concept with this and a proof of concept with that. Over the last couple of years, that concept around a proof of concept has migrated into something called proof of value. There, in other words, we're not proving out the technology. We know the technology works. What we are doing though is showing a proof of value now, right? So we're taking a specific technology and saying, what kind of value can we get from a business outcome perspective with this technology? And I think now, more into COVID, we've moved into very much point solutions. And when I say point, we're still in that buy versus build mantra. Different organizations decide on different things. As actually on a call last week, where I heard from a fantastic Canadian organization there who had an IT department of 4 people there for a big national organization, and then extended that department through partners there. In other words, IT wasn't about building their own things. It was about making sure IT worked for the business and had the correct business outcomes. And I would say, that's really one of the things that as CTOs, we've really got to focus on right now when it comes to planning, when it comes to road mapping, when it comes to looking at that outcome, is we got to make sure that there's a revenue, a cost, a citizen outcome. If we're government, we've got to make sure that there's an outcome that validates the expense before we even get going. There. So, we're going back a few years now. We're starting to write business cases, right? And everything we do has got to have a valid business case with proof and with evidence, rather than us spinning up a project to develop that proof or evidence.
Right. And speaking of what a CTO should be keeping in mind, I'm sure you can relate that a key challenge that many companies face nowadays is being truly agile. So, what goes into implementing an agile methodology, and what do companies get wrong about it? Because like being agile has also become like a buzzword. So, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, it certainly has become a buzzword, hasn't it? I think if you can put agile on your resume, anybody wants to hire you. The reality of it is, what is agile, right? So, for me, the number one place where organizations get it right or get it wrong is how they're funding the work. All right. So, everything starts and stops with the money associated with that particular product, program, project there. And I would suggest, if organizations are still funding projects, right? So we're funding as an example, a migration project to go from on-prem into cloud. Uh, we're not funding a program, i.e., a cloud program. We're funding a project. And, for those organizations that are funding projects, I would say agile is pretty tough, right? And the reason why is because when we do get to agile, we've truly got to have the right stakeholders in place, right? So, funding's number one. I would say stakeholder, the stakeholders involved are number two. And I was working with an organization not too long ago who said, hey, let's do an agile project. And we're like, great. We started going on that particular agile project with them, and we kept reminding them all the way through, let's go and get the business involved, the people who are going to actually use this, the stakeholders. And that came in a little too late. And as soon as it happened, all of a sudden, the scope of the project changed. But when the scope changes, then the time potentially has to change, or the budget has to change. Something has to give. And I think in our mindset right now, we're still trying to run projects that are, use the term agile, but very waterfall, right? They're very fixed. We have a fixed amount of budget that we can work to, have a fixed scope that has to be delivered. And if we really want to get something agile, then again, we fund a product or we fund a program. Inside that product or program, we get the right stakeholders involved, and we have to be super flexible. That's the concept of agile, right? We have to be super flexible about what's going to deliver. That the product owner and an agile project becomes the key and essential part of being able to make that product, that thing that you're building, successful, right? Again, you look at the reality of not doing that, and you end up delivering a good piece of technology, but not necessarily technology that people are going to use. If you have an expert product owner on that particular team, then the job of that product owner is constantly translating what the business needs into what the product that we're creating is being developed. And by the time it's developed, there's people waiting to sign up and want to use it, rather than then having to go through a whole bunch of transition and learning how to use it. So we got to be careful. Agile's not about that 15-minute meeting every morning, right? Even though obviously that's part of agile, an agile process. But that's not it. It's about getting the right players in place, and it's about getting the right funding so that we truly can be agile when we approach that particular problem.
So, Paul, so is it something that, like this is at the top of your list when you're managing a project, that you feel like this, like being truly agile is something that's, really, really important for a product successful execution? So how much weightage do you give to it? I mean, there are a lot of different factors at play, right, to ensure successful execution. So where does this come into play?
Yeah, I wouldn't put a weight next to it. What I'd do is put a decision criteria next to it. And I don't think every piece of work that we do needs to operate in an agile manner. I think agile is an option. It fits certain categories extremely well. It's extremely successful in dealing with certain categories. But at the end of the day, if all you're using it for is a buzzword, you need to really look at your methodology and say, what is the methodology that's going to enable success for the culture of my organization and for being able to deliver the outcome of what I'm being asked to deliver. So, you know, I wouldn't put a number next to it, but it certainly is something that needs to be considered. I personally don't say everything has to be agile, though. Even though I know if we do go agile and we get the right people in place, we are going to get way better outcomes than any other approach.
And how can companies achieve successful adoption of emerging technologies like and a successful AI adoption while navigating specific industry challenges?
Yeah, and it's interesting, of what we declass or what we class emerging technologies, right? So, if I take your example then NTT Data every year publish, the top 10 technologies that are going to be either starting to be developed or developed over the next year. And it's actually a big news item when they release it, and they released it last week. And it's interesting because trend two that they put in this year's set of trends, it talks about a cognitive foundation technology will connect and control everything. And that's really the concept around automation, around cognitive AI technologies and things like that. At the end of the day, I would say 80% of AI, it really isn't AI, right? It's not artificial intelligence, or it can't deliver the outcomes that was initially identified as at the beginning of the project. Um, AI in itself is a buzzword. It's something that's been developed. It's only going to get better, but at the end of the day, it still isn't perfect. So what we really need to have to be successful is a set of governance controls that allow us to understand what actually defines success. As an example, if you're developing the AI algorithms for an electric car, let's say, or self-driving vehicle, there, at what point do we say object avoidance is good enough, right? Is it good enough if it hits an 80% accuracy? But that means then 20% of the time it could be it could be causing an accident because of certain types of objects it avoids. So it really depends on the outcome. Because again, you look at self-driving vehicles, and they're looking for close to 100% accuracy with AI predictions there to be able to make it work. Where some of the other business cases that are out there, it might be good enough to be able to drive a 60 to 70% outcome and then have human exception handling deal with the rest of it, right? In other words, we can get to the end place 60% faster than maybe we could before, and that's okay. So you've got to have that correct governance in place that drives the correct outcome.
And just to end on the same note, adoption of which technologies do you see skyrocketing in the next few years?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think if I was to put one out there, digital twin, I think is really going to be at the forefront of everything that we do as we really start to understand how we can create that digital version of a scenario, process, or an object. I think the second one is around automation, whether it's RPA or some other level of automation. We're just brushing the surface of RPA, and I think the third one, which is kind of far out there, is quantum. And when quantum comes out, we're going to see some massive advances in what we've been able to do.
Okay, right. So thank you, Paul, once again for joining us today on Veritech.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Amna.